Alright, this is take 3 of my recording for week 2 of Redcord Draft Battle Analysis. I am still an amateur at this after all these seasons. Anyways, welcome to week 2 of Redcord Draft. Not a ton of interesting battles this week, so I'll be breaking... I still picked out 3 different battles to break down and kind of go over. I got Monum versus Cable here. This one ended up being kind of a body bag due to some unfortunate RNG. A lot of the games this week ended up being body bags, and then the ones that weren't didn't have the greatest gameplay, so there really wasn't a lot to analyze other than this is a pure misplay, don't do this again, and then move on, you know? So, I picked this battle out. This is mostly going to go into what could have been and, like, prep-wise, what you should expect if you're Cable or Monum. I brought me versus Waffles. This is mostly my cheat code for when I feel there aren't a ton of interesting battles, is just to show you my battle, because that way I can give you perspective from what I was building and what I was doing versus this team, so you can kind of see that. And then finally we have Typical versus Alexel. This ended up actually being a pretty good battle that went very down to the wire, so yeah. To get right into it, let's go to Monum versus Cable. So if we go to the matchup here, right, we got Monum all the way on the right over here, and then we got Cable on the left over here, right? So, first thing I notice is Spectrier is kind of forced into sub-willow hex. Why is Spectrier forced into sub-willow hex? Well, it's two things. First of all, you have to run sub. Why do you have to? Because of Ditto. I want you to look at Monum's team and think about Scarf Shadowball Spectrier. Not great switch-ins, especially if you're copying like a Grimnay boost or a Nasty Plot boost. That could be really, really bad for Monum. You're almost forced into, like, an AV Hydrapple or, like, a Sucker Punch Chimpao. Now, don't get me wrong, AV Hydrapple is bulky as fucking shit. It's going to take one for sure. It's not, it's not a huge threat, but if Hydrapple goes down, if Hydrapple gets worn down, this Spectrier, or the Dittoed Spectrier could be rough for Monum. So you're kind of forced into substitute a little bit because you really just don't want that coming in. But Willow Hex also helps with that, because that way if Ditto does end up copying you before you get a sub up, what's it going to do? Click Hex? Oh no. Anyways, so it almost seems assured to me that it's going to be sub Willow Hex. Now you could say, but it's Misty Terrain, why we should run sub Willow Hex? And to that I say, well, Cable has his own terrain, so it's going to be overwritten quite a bit, and Monum proved last week that you really don't need to just not run status because of terrain. He ran Toxic last week, and it ended up being game-winning for him. I mean, the terrain's only up for 4 turns. It's not like it's going to be up all the time, so you don't really have to worry about it that much, right? So, that's one thing to note. The other thing is you can start reading into what Cable's going to bring here. I would say, because I don't really know what Ditto copies here, in all honesty, because I think if you copy Chi and Pao, you get walled out by Tapu Fini. You copy Scizor Omega, that really just doesn't do anything for you because you never win that in a 1v1. Like, I don't even know what you do to Hydrapple, honestly, especially if it's Terra. Let's say it goes Terra Steel, and it's got Fickle Beam, right? You copy the Hydrapple, now what do? Because it's going to click Fickle Beam into you, and you can't Terra. So, as much as, like, I feel Spectrier is forced into that set, I also just don't think Ditto comes. So maybe you could still run a Shadow Ball set, but you still have to contend with the most annoying part of this matchup, which is Komodo. Komodo, because of Bulletproof, means that Shadow Ball will not be able to get through it, so you're forced to run something else. Now, in any other versus a non-Terra Komodo, you wouldn't care. You could do Plot, Shadow Ball, Draining Kiss, and 6-0 a team, right? However, this is Terra Komodo, right? So it's not going to do that. My thought is it's probably, I mean, you could see, if I'm building the Komodo for Cable here, right? What does it do? You have to think for Komodo, what can it do defensively? What can it do offensively? Now, defensively, what can Komodo do here? It can switch into Spectrier, right? But it can still get Willowed, it can still get Hexed. So it's not like the greatest thing in the world, right? You really don't want to make it a raw switch into Spectrier like that, because you still will probably lose a lot. That's one thing. What else can it do defensively? Okay, you're not beating Chi and Pao, just straight up. There's no Terra you can go to that is safe from Crash, Crunch, Sacred Sword, as far as I'm aware, at least. I don't think there is. Even like raw Terra fighting is taking a lot from Ice Crash and Sacred Sword still, so like you can't really like do that, I don't feel like. No matter what you do with this Komodo, Finny is coming in every single time. In addition to that, you have to contend with Hydrapple, you have to run fire coverage for Scizor, so defensive Komodo really isn't great here. I think really the only thing you would want to do is maybe like Helmet to catch Scizor U-turns, but why would you ever do that if you have a Moltres that hard walls it, right? So you could probably start thinking, okay, Cable's bringing offensive Komodo. What can offensive Komodo do to Tapu Fini? That's the real question, right? So, Fini, Haze, defensive, Water Fairy. Komodo gets Steel, he gets Poison coverage. Steel's not great, but Poison does hit. So maybe D-Dance P-Jab, maybe it's Clang Soul, Terra Steel, Flash Cannon. I would start wagering that it's going to be Terra Steel because Fini can't touch Steel types, unless it's with Water moves, which Komodo is so fat that doesn't really matter. Yeah, so you need to start thinking about all that with the Komodo. If I'm Monum, I'm probably going to think the Komodo might be offensive, and as much as I'd probably run Spadaf Hydrapple in this matchup with AV, I would definitely consider having like some type of defense or some way to deal with it, which Monum did end up bringing, which is good on his behalf. Now, one of the real problems with this matchup is what the hell do you do with Scizor because of this Moltres? Now, I feel like there's two main ideas you can go with. Mirai came up with this idea, which is SD Knock in the Misty terrain. Get rid of its boots, put up rocks with Nidoqueen. Every time it switches in, you take 50. If you position Scizor in the Misty terrain a second time, +2 knockoff should just kill it, plus the rocks. That's a good idea. I like that idea. I'm not super fond of it, but I do think it is it's for sure a valid idea. Now, that positioning is still difficult. You have to contend with someone else's terrain. Coco is still a thing. If it's something like Pivot Coco, you might have a harder time positioning it that way because there's going to be a lot of times where I feel like because Fini doesn't get any pivot, you could probably, if you're like a bulkier Coco, you could probably just come in raw on Fini and just overwrite the terrain and Volt Switch out. Or U-turn. Probably, definitely U-turn because Nidoqueen otherwise just completely beats it. So that is one thing to consider. The other path, if you don't want to go with SD Scizor, is to go just standard pivot defog, right? Other than that, you're running defog on Fini. If you want to run defog in this matchup, which I feel like you do, because I feel like Mammo Rocks and Tentacruel T-Spikes are like very much an option, but if you're bringing Nidoqueen, maybe you're not so worried about the T-Spikes, so I mean, it's really just Mammo Rocks. If you're not running defog on Scizor, it's going to Fini, and if you're not doing either of that, Rocks are staying up the whole game, which means you might want to run Boots on Chi and Pow, which you don't really want to do, right? But you don't want defog on Fini. You really, like, who the hell would want to override their own terrain every single time they come in? That just doesn't make a ton of sense. So it falls to this thing where it's like, you either run offensive Scizor and you do this positioning thing with Misty terrain, or you run pivot and you kind of just let it get burned, or just hope your Misty terrain is always up, or double out, right? And play around it that way, and just have other ways to break the Moltres, right? Monum ended up going with a pivot Scizor that was super defensive. The reasoning for this is purely because of Mamoswine. Other than that, Mamoswine actually kind of fries this team. EQ doesn't have great switch-ins outside of Hydrapple, to which that's getting Ice Crashed. So you need Scizor to kind of switch into that. Now, could you still do offensive off the back of that? Maybe. That's a little hard. So, I mean, let's just get into the game. I think I've held you up long enough. We see Terra Electric Hydrapple. This is very much a mid-ground, Electric's only weak to ground. It's a mid-ground to just not having any weaknesses at all. I like that. This does make it a 50-50 versus Mammo on what he clicks into the Hydrapple. That is one thing to note. Other than that, like, most of these Pokemon are not going to have great coverage to hit you unless it's like Komodo with Earthquake, because it's the only move it can have, really, right? Yeah, so we see lead Coco. I mean, this is pretty obvious, versus lead Scizor. I mean, yes, both of these mons get pivot. You can U-turn on all the bad matchups. Probably low-key just click U-turn anyways. You get your terrain up as Cable, so you get Iron Crown boost if you need to. But yeah. So we're going to see right away that Cable does not click a pivoting move, and instead just hard goes Moltres. Now, you could read a number of things from this. One, this is Mega Scizor, right? So, one, maybe he just doesn't want to take a Bullet Punch. You could say maybe that means it's less bulky Coco, or he's saving it for something else. Two, that means he doesn't have pivoting moves. if he doesn't have pivoting moves, that means he's saving them for something else, because Coco doesn't get a ton of moves, right? And if you're running Defog on this team, it's just going to be on Moltres, because you don't need a ton of moves on Moltres in this matchup, at least in my opinion. So no pivot from Cable here means it likely doesn't, it maybe doesn't have Volt Switch or U-turn, and he's not like a pivoting Coco. My guess would be to start suspecting something like CM Stored Power, seeing this play off turn 1, because that is a set that can beat Nidoqueen. So I would start thinking about that if I was Monum here. But we do see Cable just go to Moltres. This is just a hard counter to Scizor if there's no Misty Terrain. It can't hit it for anything more than knockoff damage, and it can get burned every time, right? And rocks aren't even up, so you, like, as of right now, as long as you play your Coco positioning correctly, because Nidoqueen is a free switch to Coco, as long as it isn't CM Stored Power, even then it's going to beat it most of the time, I feel. You, like, Cable can just kind of make sure that rocks aren't going up unless Monum is, like, really forcing it, right? But we see the AV Hydropple come in. This is in reaction to Coco, which is strange. So Monum likely expecting something like maybe a Volt Switch? I don't know. Maybe something like he is expecting the double to Moltres and knows that this has good Spatak, and probably has Terra Blast Electric, if we're being honest. But it also means he might go for early Terra. He actually just ends up doubling, doesn't want to take the move, and wants to get his Misty Terrain up, which is totally fair. And we see Cable just go to the Tentacruel. I mean, yeah, this is probably P-Jab or Gunk Shot, any poison move. Finny doesn't really like that. And one thing to note about Toxic Spikes versus Finny, not a ton of people know this because you don't see this interaction very often. If Toxic Spikes go up, Hazards proc before Terrain goes up. So if there is no Misty Terrain and Finny comes in on T-Spikes, it'll get poisoned before it sets its own terrain, so it will still get poisoned. But yeah, we see Scizor come in on the Gunk Shot. Yeah, okay, so now we know it's Gunk Shot, likely more defensive. Scizor just coming in to eat that. Can't even get burned by like a potential Skull because of Misty Terrain, so you can just get your Mega off, U-turn or knock off. Monum chooses knock off, removing the boots on Moltres, which is just really nice. Now you could choose to U-turn here, but if you're worried that the Moltres is faster, which it naturally is, so if you're not running any speed, you have to switch. Yeah, so you can't U-turn. But you do get the knockoff on this, which means if you force rocks later on and keep them up, this Moltres is in big, like, really bad shape, meaning you can force the Scizor in a lot more. Cable just chooses to U-turn, doesn't go for the fire move, and now gets in a Mamoswine out of the Nidoqueen. So this is an Earthquake. This is plain and simple just an Earthquake into the whole team. Yeah, I mean, Monum can go Hydropple, but then you probably are forcing Terra, unless Monum gets the predict right. Yeah, I mean, Monum clicks Protect here, just to see what he goes for. He wants to know the difference if he's going for EQ, if he's going for Ice Crash. I don't know how much I like this Protect, because I feel like if it's a choiced Mamo, that Stealth Rocks is also kind of an easy play for Cable here, but it's fine. Now Cable catches the switch and puts up Rocks. I feel like you could have maybe just clicked Rocks first, because I really don't know what this Nidoqueen does to you. Does it get Focus Blast? I don't know. I haven't fought enough Nidoqueens to know that, so I feel like you could have maybe have Rocks first, but this is fine. You get your Rocks up, and then you just go Moltres. There's no Flame Body, or no Flame Body, sorry. There's no Misty Terrain. So Monum makes a very good double to Finny, calling the Moltres coming in. This means he doesn't have to U-turn off the Moltres, he doesn't have to get Flame Bodied, and he can get his terrain back up for later, for when the Scizor inevitably comes back in. Cable hard switches as Nature's Madness comes off, does about half to this Tentacruel, and we see no Black Sludge. Now, when I see no Black Sludge on a Tentacruel, I think it's Assault Vest. That's just my thought, because I just see this thing run AV very often. It could be something like a Resist Berry, but no Black Sludge is absolutely something you should be noting. And we just see the pivot from Cable, and we're actually see Komodo coming here instead of Moltres. Now, clearly, Cable's going for the setup, right? It's Terra Steel Komodo, so I should have paused before we got into this and looked at the Terra, but when you could kind of get an idea of what the Komodo said based on its Terra. Given that it's Steel, it's meant to beat Finny, right? It's not meant to come in on Finny, but it's meant to beat Finny. If it's meant to beat Finny, we already talked about earlier how this is likely an offensive set because like defensive Komodo just doesn't do a lot for Cable in this matchup. This means it's going to have something for Finny, so you need to play very, very carefully now. Cable wisely chooses to stick his typing. He might as well. I mean, he doesn't really take anything from Scizor right now, so no reason to Terra yet, and then gets the D-Dance off. So this gets Poison Jab. So this is clicking Poison Jab this turn. If you're Monum, low-key no idea what you do about this. You could either maybe what you do is you sack Nidoqueen, potentially, because he's going, Cable is going to Terra this turn, so he doesn't take a Moonblast. But he is absolutely clicking Poison Jab this turn. And that's what we see happen. We see the Steel come off, we see Poison Jab come off, it does 83, and then we see Nature's Madness come off. And Monum gets half here, right? Which is nice. However, after Leftovers, this is going to be at 4% the next time it comes in. So the idea that you could kind of force Scizor in with the Misty Terrain to beat the Moltres is now a little out of the question, because you're only really getting one more proc of Misty Terrain, because this is either getting sacked this turn or it's getting swapped out, and the next time it comes in, it's at 4. So like even Moltres, the next time it's in, could just stay in Flamethrower and pretty much hit the whole team outside of Hydrapple. But yeah, this just isn't good. And then Cable decides to click Earthquake here in order to cover. First of all, it still kills the Finny from this range. He doesn't need to Poison Jab again. And then, I mean, it covers the whole team. He's not going to go Hydrapple when he already clicked Poison Jab. Yeah, I mean, this is just a good play. Maybe as Monum you see that coming, because Earthquake is good into this team and does beat a lot of Mons, but I mean, it's really hard to tell what coverage moves the Kamo runs outside of it beats the era. This Mon beats it, so he's got to have coverage for it, right? We see Hydrapple come in, and now Cable is forced into a little bit of a 50-50 here because it is Terra Electric. He can either stay in and click Earthquake, predicting the Terra, or click Poison Jab and predict no Terra, right? Monum is forced in the 50-50 as well. Monum is packing Dragon Tail here, so he can force this out, and given its limited HP, it would be difficult for Komoa to set up Sweep a second time. It's not impossible, but difficult. So this isn't like entirely losing for Monum. This is still like, if you get this 50-50 right, this is still a really hard game for you. Let's say you force out the Komoa and Dragon Tail it, right? Depending on what rolls, whatever comes in, like, you have no idea. I guess you have no idea what's coming in. But, like, at this point, Finny's dead on arrival. Scizor no longer is going to beat Moltres. I mean, it didn't in the first place, but now Scizor is, like, crippled by Moltres. As long as Cable has good switches to Chi and Pow and good switches to Spectrier, this game is going to be extremely difficult to win for Monum. Like, extremely difficult. Yeah, this Komoa has punched so many holes. Nidoqueen is dead, so it can't get rocks out. This, like, again, Moltres has free reign over Scizor at this point. Finny is dead on arrival. It's just not coming in for another turn. It's basically a sack now. Chi and Palvid's not boots, which we'll see is 25%. Like, this is really difficult for Monum, and that's even before you come to this 50-50, right? Now, Monum does do the calc here and does learn that he lives a Poison Jab if he sticks his Terra, and that EQ does more, obviously, because it's 100 base power versus 80. So Monum decides just to not Terra, right? And he gets crit for it. This is game over. Chi and Pow obviously dies in 1. This is already dead. I don't even know what Spectrier does to this, outside of maybe Willow if you have it. It more than likely has fire coverage for Scizor, because you're kind of crazy if not. Maybe it's Drain Punch last. But if it is just Fire Punch last, like, this game is just over. Your best chance is to go Spectrier, like right now, and Willow. But Monum plots instead, which tells me that he's not Willow Hex. He ended up being plot Shadow Ball Psychic at the end of the day. So, yeah. I mean, this is just game. This is really tough. I don't know what you do about this. It is Boots Jianbao, by the way, so that does tell me it's maybe no defog on Scizor, which makes sense, because it's certainly U-turn Bullet Roost, at least. Or Bullet Roost at a minimum. Yeah, I mean, there's just not a ton you can do about that, except maybe get the 50 right and 50-50 right in Terra instead. But, yeah, that's a real tough one. This Kamo, just, like, Kamo's a strong mon, especially with Terra. It's hard to prep for. You really have to narrow down what it's going to bring. Yeah. This is the other thing, is I don't even know what Spectrier would have done to a Steel combo, because it's Steel, your coverage moves deal nothing to it. Shadow Ball is not doing anything, Psychic isn't doing anything, Dragon Kiss isn't doing anything. Maybe your Dark Bolts and it hits it, but like non-stab Dark Pulse isn't doing a whole lot. Yeah, I mean, once that crit happened, the game ended. Even after the Dragon Tail, this thing punched so many holes. This would have been really hard for Modem to win. But yeah, it's a 6-0 for Kamoa. What can you do? Moving on to the next, me versus Waffles. Yeah, getting my thoughts together for this game. Yeah, so let's just get into the matchup first before I really dive into my prep and what I brought. Waffles' team is right here, so you can kind of see what he has, and you can see my team here. So, you can see the dynamic of Waffles' team. It's Chilly Reception Slowking into Baxcalibur, right? On top of this, Slowking also gets Trick Room. This can set up Mega Maw. You have Rillaboom for recovery. This also nullifies Earthquakes versus Slowking Galar. Also, Grassy Terrain with Annihilate is just really good, because Annihilate very often wants to run like sub leftovers to get sub leftovers bulk up, or maybe just no sub and just bulk up leftovers with Rage Fist in order to just stack as many Rage Fists as possible, so that extra bit of healing is really threatening. And then to top it all off, you have a Terra Thunderous, right? Yeah, this is a scary team. However, this team does really bad into mine. Why is that? One, I have the speed in this matchup 100%. The fastest mon on Waffles' team is base 101 Thundo T. The next mon down, I think, if I'm reading this correctly, is it Bax? I don't know base speeds off the top of my head, but it's like the next base speed mon is in the 80s, right? Maybe Linoon is faster, but like low-key, we just write off Linoon. We don't even think about Linoon if we're fighting this team. So immediately, Dragapult can run a lot of HP because it doesn't need to be faster than a lot. Urshifu doesn't really need to be Scarf because it doesn't have to outspeed a whole lot. Gardevoir outspeeds a lot of stuff naturally, so does Cinderace. This is really hard already for Waffles. On top of that, there's a lot of mons in this matchup that I think are just straight doo-doo fart. Obviously, Mudsdale, I don't think, well, that's not obviously, but Mudsdale does like nothing here. With Crit Urshifu and Dragapult, you don't beat either of them. You don't beat Celesteela, you don't beat Gardevoir. I guess you beat Cinderace, but like, you could beat Cinderace with Blastoise, so you don't even need to, like, Mudsdale is not coming. What does Annihilate do in this matchup? It cannot boost its speed. Annihilate doesn't have ways to do that. What does it switch into? It doesn't switch into Pult or Urshifu, unless you're calling U-turn. It doesn't switch into Cinderace either, again, unless you're calling U-turn. It doesn't even really switch into Deoxys that well if I'm like Nightshading. Well, I guess that's unfair to say. It does switch into Deoxys, but if I'm like Toxic or something, that could be devastating. Yeah, I mean, and then the other thing is, no matter how much you bulk up and do sub leftovers and whatever, I have a Gardevoir Mega with Pixelate Hyper Voice. I can Hyper Voice through the sub and kill it instantly. It just doesn't matter. Annihilate is really bad here. What can Rillaboom do in the face of a Celesteela? Literally nothing. The best coverage it gets is knockoff. And then once I lose my item, then what? So Rillaboom doesn't do a whole lot here. Annihilate doesn't do a whole lot here. What does Mega Mawile do? Alright, well, let's see. We have a Gastrodon, a Deoxys Defense, and a Celesteela. How does Mawile get through that core? It's hard, but it's not impossible, but it's also slower. And I have mons like Dragapult and Urshifu can just like come in after and click maybe like a Banded CC or something and just wipe it off. So I can trade the mons a lot and just trade sacks and then get something out of it after. And if I'm not banded, let's say the Maw is chipped to CC level, if I just click like bulk up on the switch, like what does he do then? Nothing. Wicked Blow doesn't have a lot of switch-ins outside of the Mawile, so it's really hard. Thundurus Therian has a really hard matchup because Gastrodon just beats it. It gets Grass Knot. Grass Knot is only base 60 power versus Gastrodon, so unless it's Terra Grass Thundo with Terra Blast, I am going to just freely go Gastrodon every single time I see Thundo T, because I eat the Volt Switches, U-turn isn't doing anything, I can get rocks up in the face of it. On top of this, Pre-Mega Gardevoir has Trace. That means I can Trace the Volt Absorb. So Volt Switch is also just really hard to mash into my team. So yeah, that's almost every mon here. The other thing to note is Slowking is also just really bad defensively. Dragapult and Urshifu can both beat it. Celesteela can stall it out. It doesn't do a lot to Celesteela. Gardevoir Mega gets Psyshock. Like, what do you even do in the face of this team? Finally is Baxcalibur. Now, I want you to just think for a second. If Baxcalibur clicks D-Dance into my team, what can I do to stop it? Yeah, there's not really a ton of options. Now, really, the big things I thought were, one, if it is D-Dance, the best thing it can do is Loaded Dice Icicle Spear. That means it is forced into Loaded Dice. That means I have to get rocks up, and that is a priority. Rocks must go up. Second, Deoxys defense probably loads him for full, so Deoxys defense needs to be another counter. Third of all, I learned that Gardevoir Mega, and prepping for this matchup, gets a Vacuum Wave. So combo that all together. Vacuum Wave from Gardevoir does about 30, Rocks does about 25, and then Nightshade does about another 30. I can beat it most of the time. But that's still very worrying, because Urshi dies, Dragapult dies, especially if it's like, say it's D-Dance, Ice Shard, Ice Spear, and then maybe Glaive Rush last, or Scale Shot even could be an option. I still threaten Sucker Punch on Urshifu, because Ice Shard won't kill me in a billion years. Dragapult also gets Sucker Punch, funnily enough, if I wanted to bring that. Celesteela also has Terra. If I go into, say, Steel Terra, and you only bring Dual Stab, like the set I was mentioning, that could be really difficult to get through, which is what I end up doing, and that's the reason I ended up bringing Terra Steel, by the way. And also, on top of that, who do you set up in front of, right? There's not a ton to really just click a D-Dance in front of, so if we look at the team that I ended up bringing, first of all, we see a key bring from Waffles is he brings no Blastoise. This means no Rapid Spin. This means when my rocks go up, they're staying up, so I don't even have to fight for them. This is great for me. Rocks are great if Thunder was in heavy-duty boots, and they're great for Baxcalibur. I need rocks specifically for Baxcalibur. But also, let's look at my team. Who does Bax set up in front of, right? Gardevoir, absolutely not. Not Urshifu either. Definitely not Dragapult. Maybe, no, Celesteela not either, because if I'm running Steel coverage, you're dead. Gastrodon or Deoxys. That's really about it. So if Deoxys is at full, it doesn't do a lot back, but it could run like T-Wave. It could get 2 Nightshades off, and then I kill with Vacuum Wave, so I don't care. If it's at full health, it's living 1 no matter what, so that's still really hard to set up in front of. And then what about Gastrodon? Gastrodon is the only other thing you could see setting up in front of here, which is why I changed my Gastrodon set. Originally, I was Toxic with Rindoberry in case of Grass moves from Thundo, but then I realized that Grass Knot is still only 60 base power. I low-key don't care that much. I ran Expert Belt Rock Tomb. This always breaks sub, does 25% minimum to Baxcalibur, as long as he's not like super fat, and if he's super fat, he doesn't have speed, or he's lower in attack, or something else that I can exploit, so it's fine. And I'm running a Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb is 95%, it's my most accurate rock move, besides Ancient Power, I guess, but I'm also running Rock Tomb because it 100% of the time drops speed by 1. If Bax doesn't get a speed boost, I win anyways. So what does Bax even set up in front of? Right, at this point, it can't set up in front of Gastrodon. It really doesn't want to set up in front of Deoxys. It can't set up in front of any of these 4. This is just impossible, really. Unless you play out of your mind as Waffles, this is a really hard matchup. We see off lead here. We see I lead Gastrodon because it beats any lead that isn't Rillaboom, and I can just put rocks up, and they won't come down. Again, I noticed no Blastoise. That means I will lead whatever, and I will put up Stealth Rocks. That's it, right? We can look at the Terras here. When we see an interesting Terra Fairy Thundo, I was not expecting Terra Fairy Thundo. I didn't think Fairy was, like, great offensively into my team. I mean, sure, if Steela goes down, it's good, but, like, outside of that, like, Deoxys is still eating everything, even without any Spadef investment. I mean, I do understand it, because otherwise your only switch to Urshifu is the Mawile. Now, you're still taking a lot, because you're not defensively invested as Thundo, but this does give you another option to beat Urshifu. Now, you see I brought Terra Steel, Celesteela. I mentioned this earlier, but this is to create 50-50s versus Baxcalibur. One, high horsepower for Baxcalibur doesn't look great in this matchup. I don't think there's like going to be a very often where he does end up running that. Second of all, if he does end up doing, say, dual stab with Ice Shard and then D-Dance last, that means Celesteela just beats it, just straight up. Yeah, plain and simple. We see this lead, and then we see a very interesting turn of events where Waffles clicks Final Gambit, and I click Recover. I said I wanted to lead and click Stealth Rocks because I beat everything. That was until I saw this lead Annihilate. Now, the play here for me was either stay in and click Recover or go to Dragapult. That means I knew it was Final Gambit. How did I know it was Final Gambit? Well, it's actually really not that hard to figure out. One, who leads Annihilate in the face of a Dragapult when Dragapult like so very often gets led into a lot of teams because it's faster than everything. It clicks free U-turn. If not, it could maybe just rip off like a Specs Draco, a Specs Shadow Ball, like a Specs Shadow Ball into this team. That seems really good. If I do end up bringing Specs, if it's a supportive set, something like Sub Willow, I could lead it, click Sub, click Willow. So that, like, none of that, why would you lead Annihilate when I could, like, I feel like I have kind of a free Dragapult lead here. That means, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. On top of that, why would you even bring Annihilate? Like, every time Annihilate does anything, I get one play right. I go to Gardevoir, I click Mega, I click Hyper Voice, and it dies instantly. So because Annihilate made so little sense here, I knew it just had to be Scarf Final Gambit. That's it. That's all it can be here. And it's probably running Shadow Claw in order to like maybe hit Scarf Bolt pretty hard. Or not Scarf Bolt, to hit Lead Bolt pretty hard. Now, one thing to note here, I forgot that Annihilate could Seed Bomb. Wevels almost clicked Seed Bomb off lead, but clicked Final Gambit instead. Now, the reason I say it didn't recovered is I didn't want to have to worry about Final Gambit later because I'm only running rocks, and Annihilate doesn't take a lot from that, and I, like, really kind of need the HP in this Gastrodon to make sure that I can consistently wall out Thundo and get rocks up later, because, again, I need rocks in order to, like, make sure that I can beat the Baxcalibur, which then guarantees me the win. So I was perfectly okay with taking this Final Gambit. I know I always live on like 4 HP because Annihilate's base 110, this is base 111 HP. So if he's going to click Scar Final Gambit, I'm just going to click Recover, heal it off. This 55% means I'm still a switch to Thundo as long as he doesn't click Grass Knot. And my rule for Thundurus is plain and simple. It's going to be Scarf until proven otherwise. That is my role for fighting Thundurus, so I'm going to assume this is Scarf, especially since in this matchup speed is really bad. And also Terra Fairy just makes sense for Scarf, because it means you outspeed Pult, and now you kind of have like a mini check to it, right? But, if we're being honest, the better play was just to go Dragapult, because this does get Seed Bomb, and if he clicks it, I take like 70, right? Now, again, I recover that off, and then I can switch next turn, because I know it's going to be Scarf Annihilate. But that still means I really should just be going Pult here. So that is a little bit of a misplay on my part. Although, I do think getting this trade on the Final Gambit is better for me. I think the safer play was just to go Pult, and then fire off, because I'm Sub-Willow Hex. Either click Sub, fire off a Will-O-Wisp, literally anything. Probably just click Sub, because you don't really want backs coming in on raw Will-O-Wisp, which is the reason I'm also running D-Darts as the last move just to hit backs, because an early backs means I just win. But yeah, we see that die, I go up him on, and then Rillaboom comes in. As I said earlier, Celesteela hardwalls Rillaboom, and this is where we see some shenanigans unfold. This Heavy Slam, well first I sub, because I am sub Leech Seed, but then I look at the calcs, and I realize that Heavy Slam does over half to this. And then I'm like, wait a minute, Heavy Slam has no switch-ins. So I decided to just rip an early Terra Steel, because at this point I don't feel I need to conserve it. And just decide to rip Heavy Slam. This also gives me, the other main reason for this is my leftovers have been knocked off. Now I get recovery. If I'm not going to click Leech Seed, now I get recovery from the grassy terrain because I'm grounded now. So I can just rip Terra Steel, Heavy Slam the whole team. And there's no way it breaks my sub. So now something is just going to come in, right? Thundo comes in. This is obviously going to Volt Switch off my sub. So I decide to just sub again. Yeah. And then I reveal a devastating part of the set, and that I actually am max speed to outspeed this Rillaboom. That was not the intention of this set. The intention of this set was, the one thing with Annihilate is it does have a little bit of a gameplay feature where if it goes behind a sub, I kind of have to be a little aggressive with it, right? So if, say I have Celesteela in and Annihilate comes in, and it is like a max HP sub, I do have a little bit of a choice to make between Heavy Slamming and Leech Seeding as the Celesteela. Because if he clicks Sub, my Leech Seed, all my stuff doesn't work. If I Heavy Slam and he clicks Bulk Up, I don't do a ton of damage. And he gets a stack of Rage Fish, which now is pretty scary for me to switch into. Like, I don't, look at my team, I actually don't have great Ghost Resists on this team. So Annihilate with Rage Fist in that scenario could be really scary. This speedy Celesteela just means that I'm going to be faster than Annihilate, because he's not going to, if he's going to be bulky Annihilate, he's not going to run speed. I'll be faster than Annihilate. I can cut out the middleman. I'll go faster than the sub. I can get Leech Seed before the sub goes off, and then Heavy Slam before he can bulk up, right? And it just makes my life a lot easier in terms of dealing with this Annihilate. He just brought Scar Final Gambit anyway, so it didn't end up mattering. And instead, we get this interesting scenario where I'm faster than Rillaboom, and now I get another Heavy Slam into this team. And again, look at the switch-ins. There aren't any. We see Thundo come in. Boom, 41%. Now, at this point, I have to switch. And Waffles just clicks Volt Switch. And because of that Volt Switch, now we get to see if this is choiced or not. Well, not exactly, but, I mean, Gastrodon doesn't really have a ton to hit the Thundo. So he could stay in and click Grass Knot, or he could Terra. Sorry, I'm getting tripped up over my words, but he does hard switch here. So, like, my feelings that this is Scarf Thundo are not going away anytime soon. And I get my Rock Set, which means they're staying up for the rest of the game. I wanted this earlier. Actually, a couple turns ago. It was actually this turn versus the Thundo. I knew he was going to Volt Switch. I very heavily considered going to Gastrodon to get my aggressive Rocks up to guarantee my win versus Baxcalibur in the end game. I was very, very close to doing that, but I just decided that, you know what, I'm just going to stay in and click Heavy Slam. I don't think I need to make crazy plays right now. I'm very far in the lead as far as I'm aware. He's down a Mon, and, you know, this Slowking is very, very much chipped down, so yeah, I just decided to rip the Heavy Slam instead, and, you know, we get back to the scenario where I get my Rocks up. Again, we're just going to go to Celesteela every time Rillaboom is here, and we see Woodhammer come off, which is a play I don't exactly agree with. I'm sorry, Waffles. I feel like you should probably be calling the Celesteela coming in here. I don't need the Celesteela anymore. It really doesn't do a whole lot for me, and once it's dead, I can start I can go to, like, Urshifu or something and start making big-time progress. Woodhammering 1 makes sure you're in range of Heavy Slam afterwards, because if we saw the last Heavy Slam to this off of the Terra Steel, that's Zeuscan, who it did 57, right? So Woodhammer did 8% of Chib. If he didn't Woodhammer and didn't take the recoil, he's up at 60%. And now he might live a Heavy Slam and high horsepower me afterwards. So I feel like just calling the Celesteela is probably the better play there. But the other thing to note is that I was about 90% sure Grassy Glide killed from that range, and he did not click it. This told me he might not be Glide on Rillaboom. It tells me that, or he made a misplay and didn't think about it, because Adamant Grassy Glide should have killed me from that range, and I know it's not bulky or speedy because I'm both outspeeding it, and my Heavy Slam is doing so much damage that I know it's not, like, super duper bulky. So he's not max HP, max defense. He's got to be max attack Adamant. Yeah, I don't really know, but either way, Heavy Slam hits the Slowking. I can just Heavy Slam again. I don't care, right? I could have gone for, like, a greedy Leech Seed maybe, but he's just going to Chili out most of the time anyway, so we get this Thundo to take rocks because he did not Terra earlier, which is also maybe a bit of a misplay, but his Celesteela switch-ins are running out, so I'm not going to harp on it too much. But now this is on 34. I rocks up for Baxcalibur. Really, all I have to do is just beat Mawile. And I have 6 Pokemon to do it. So I really, like, at this point, I know I'm winning, right? And there's not really a ton Waffles can do to stop it. I make a double to Celesteela here. Why did I make a double to Celesteela here? Because last time he swapped out on the Gastrodon, I'm 90% sure he's Choice Scarf, so I don't think he's going to stay in Grass Knot in order to try and get cheeky damage. Gastrodon cannot do shit to Rillaboom. I'm running, like, Rock Tomb Earth Power as my moves. What do I do to a Rillaboom, right? I also haven't really made an aggressive play all game, and I'm so far ahead, I don't really need to make an aggressive play, so I know I can just kind of get away with this for free, and just get another Heavy Slam off with Celesteela, and just put me, like, so far in the lead that I really can't be losing at that point, which is why I make this double. I also just don't want to give him momentum. Considering the 3 moves he's revealed, I'm nervous that his last move is U-turn. Well, I'm not nervous about it, but I'm starting to think his last move is U-turn, and he's running no Grassy Glide. So making this kind of switch means Waffles can't get any momentum. He's really just kind of dead in the water, right? Because now I get another Heavy Slam, and something has to die, because this is a Fairy type, and Mawile's dying to 2. I get my defense boost. Mawile comes in. Now at this point, I'm okay with sacking Celesteela. This thing has more than done its job. I don't need it anymore. The heavy slam damage is pretty good for me. I can just go to Pult, sub, Willow, whatever the hell. It doesn't matter. Yeah, my next play is most probably just to go to Pult and Willow when this dies to Fire Fang, which it probably will. I could also go to... Actually, Gastrodon dies to a hit, so never mind. I could also go to Urshifu and click CC and just get a shit ton of damage. And just sack the Urshifu for damage, and then go to, like, Gardevoir after and sweep. Because I kill this with Mystical Fire, and I kill the other two with Fairy moves. So, I have a ton of options here. I really just don't care for the, like, I don't care for differential at this point. If I'm going to win, I'm just going to win, right? Instead, we get a really interesting turn here, where Waffles doesn't Mega. I know this is a mistake, because why would you not do that? And then Fire Fang misses. Okay, so before we go into the next turn, first of all, Waffles says he clicked the button and it just didn't work. I don't know what happened there. Don't ask me, but that is unfortunate because I do like 30 if it megas, but instead I get way more damage. Second of all, Fire Fang miss. I mean, because he didn't mega, it wouldn't have killed anyways, so it doesn't like super matter, but it does actually a little bit because now that I have taken one from grassy terrain, I'm about 90% sure with the defense boost, I have a chance to live this next Fire Fang. So I can just heavy slam again. Now, he can still sucker me the turn after. So I could play the 50-50, but yeah, that's just a really terrible turn overall. Like, not the no mega into the miss is like, you take a ton of damage, Fire Fang miss it, like, it's just really tough. I heavy slam again. So we don't even get to see what an endgame where I have to sack a bunch of mons would lead. Instead, we just get an endgame where I kill them all while for free, and we all live happily ever after. So, yeah, I didn't want this. I wanted a more interesting endgame, but yeah, it happens. Now, at this point, I make a small misplay, and this is maybe my biggest regret with this game. I stay in here because I kill with Heavy Slam, and then I beat Bax in the 1v1, so he has to attack me with Bax. There's a chance he might not even kill me if he's not running high horsepower. So there's a chance I just win. Also, there is a chance I live Thunderbolt from this range if he's Jolly. If he's Jolly. He's Scarf. He's not Jolly. He's Modest. I'm stupid. What I should have done is preserve the 6-0, preserve the differential. I could have gone to Gardevoir for free because he has to T-Bolt in order to kill me. I could have gone to Gardevoir, trace the Volt Absorb, and then just click Psyshock into whatever comes in. If Bax comes in, he takes the Psyshock, I click Mega, kill it with Hyper Voice. This comes right back out, and I go to Deoxys to see what movie clicks. After I see what movie locks into, I switch again to figure out whatever doesn't kill and kill it back and preserve my 6-0. This still grants me the win, but I lose a Mon for it when I don't have to. Now, given that I'm sitting number 1 right now off of the 6-0 and a 5-0, I don't need to preserve differential as much as maybe I'm like harping on myself for it, but given that the top 4 seeds get around 1 bye for playoffs, preserving that differential could be really important in case that it comes down to a race. So I really should have made that play, but I just ended up not doing it. But yeah, I mean, that was a really hard matchup for Waffles. On top of that, he got very unlucky, and I brought a surprise Celestial set that he had no answers for, really, so that was very difficult. Now, the one thing to note with this matchup, Waffles' team was very weak to sub leftovers overall. Because his team is so slow, I can kind of just sub to punish anything coming in because it's not going to be faster, and then just attack it twice. So, for example, Urshifu was sub leftovers, so was Dragapult. It was also sub leftovers. So was Celesteela. All 3 of these mons were sub leftovers. The only offensive mon that wasn't substitute was Gardevoir because I can't run leftovers on it, and I needed all my coverage moves. I needed Vacuum Wave for Bax, I needed Dual Stab for obvious reasons, and then I needed Mystical Fire to hit them all out. So, yeah, sub leftovers was just like really strong in this, but you know, it ended up working out right. I didn't need to click any of that, and Celesteela just got to click a bunch of moves. This was just a hard matchup for Waffles. I don't really know what to say outside of that. Finally, we get to our last game. Alaxel versus Typical, which was, in my opinion, the best game of the week, and I'm sure many others as well. So, just to kind of think about this matchup, first of all, let's go to Alaxel and Typical, who are both on the left side over here. We have Alaxel on the left over here. This should be appearing in OBS, right? Yeah, okay, cool. And then we have Typical on the right over here. So, a couple of things to note. Alaxel doesn't have great answers for Metacham. Most of his defensive mons die to fighting moves. Maybe the best you could consider is Burning Bolt or Gouging Fire, but that is not getting broad for obvious reasons. The only, like, real fighting resist is Lele, which is getting popped by a Zen Headbutt in Psychic Terrain, because Jesus Christ. So, maybe your answer is, like, Helmet, Lele, Telepathy, but that doesn't make any sense, because a lot of what Alaxel has here is Hoopa Unbound with its unlimited attack. Expanding Force into Typical's team, there's not a ton of switch-ins. Cover that with the fact that this thing both gets fire coverage for Firethorn, it gets Hyperspace Fury, a base 100 powered dark move that is physical and stab off of a base either 170 or 160, I forget. I mean, I have the calc here, I haven't been using it because I haven't had a need to, but like, look at Hoopa Unbound's offensive stats, 160, 170, like, this is ridiculous. I'm sorry, you can't see it, but like, this is ridiculous, right? Look at this, look at this. Like, this is insane. All right, whatever. Let me get my formatting back. There we go. So this is like, this is hard for Typical to switch into Hoopa Unbound. The only caveat is that Hoopa's really slow. It's only base 80 speed. So one thing to note about it is that it's probably going to be forced into Scarf a lot here in order to really be able to beat things. Alaxel could run webs. I think it's a little unlikely when Wheezing Defog is kind of free. With Neutralizing Gas, because it's gas, Empoleon never gets Defiant Boost. On top of that, Empoleon competitive is otherwise really strong into this team, in my opinion. I mean, sure, it gets walled out by Slowking, but that +2 is still going to do a lot of damage, and Slowking really needs its health in order to deal with things like Lele. Beating Sneasler is also going to be something to know. If Wheezing takes too much damage, Sneasler can run through this team. And Alaxel finds the best set here, which is, at least I think it's the best set. I don't know what else you could run, which is Acrobatic Sneasler, which gives you coverage for both the Landers, which you didn't really have before because your dual stabs don't hit it, and Wheezing, which you don't have otherwise. You just don't have coverage to hit otherwise. I guess Gunk Shot is your other best option, but I mean, no one really is like, yes, I get to run Gunk Shot in this matchup. No one wants to run Gunk Shot. It's 80% accurate. So Acro gives options for these both. Also, you don't need that much power. I think Acro probably 2-hit KOs Wheezing on average. And on top of that, Wheezing's pretty preoccupied because look at Gouging Fire in this matchup. Gouging Fire has an incredible matchup into this team. Incredible. Heat Crash, Dragon Claw beats everything, right? Plain and simple. Now, the one little thing you have to worry about is that Ceruledge gets Flash Fire, so it can be immune to one thing. It can Terra to be immune to a second thing. So if you need to run coverage for a third. That's it. Other than that, it's really good here. So Lele doesn't have great switch-ins. Hoopa Unbound doesn't have great switch-ins if played correctly. Gouging Fire 6-0 this team, and Sneasler wins with enough pressure. On top of that, Porygon 2 doesn't get broken unless Typical plays this game really offensively and makes like very aggressive doubles to Metacham. Like, you know, there's two things here. There's all this with the Alaxel's team, but at the same time, if Porygon 2 gets chipped, Typical can still just win because Landorus has no switch-ins, and neither does Metacham Mega. So this is going to be a battle of the sweep. Someone's going to sweep the other with one of these offensive mons because neither of them really have great defensive answers for each other. So to get right into the game, Typical doesn't bring Firethorn. It's the second week in a row, which makes some sense. You can make Slowking your wall to Lele, so you don't have to bring it versus Lele. And outside of that, Firethorn doesn't really do great into this team. I think it's not really taking expanding forces from Hoopa. I don't know. I haven't played with... I've never used Firethorn in draft. I've never used Hoopa Unbound in draft. So I couldn't tell you what either of those, like what that interaction looks like. But my guess is that expanding force does a lot to, especially with terrain. It's going to do a shit ton to Firethorn. Right. It still loses to Gouging Fire. It still loses to Sneasler. So you can consolidate it into the Slowking and make it kind of an answer to Lele. Other things to note, it's Terra Fire Hoopa. This tells me that it's got fire coverage or Terra Blast to hit Firethorn specifically. So not bringing Firethorn was a good call anyways. because you still have a semi-check to Lele, and Hoopa was going to beat it anyways because, look, it's Terrafire, right? And that's his only Terra. His other Terra is Archeops, and Archeops isn't here. On the other hand, we have Terra Fairy Ceruledge, so now you start to notice that Flash Fire, Terra Fairy, you're immune to Gouging Fire's dual stab. This is probably going to be the answer to Gouging Fire for typical, or at least some type of answer for Gouging Fire. So we see the lead. We see Medicham lead versus Tapu Lele. Typical actually swaps out, interestingly enough. He's worried about Scarf, and he's worried maybe that he doesn't kill if it's like a bulkier set. Yeah, and we see Shadow Ball Spadef drop, which is just a great turn one. That means you have to swap out again. We see a second Shadow Ball come off. Now, I will say, off of this damage, we can start to learn what this Lele set is. So if we go over here, we go Slowking, and we go Tapu Lele. It can't run. We have Hidden Power Band, so let's put Shadow Ball over that. Shadow Ball does 40 to 48, so one of two things are happening here. Let's say it's Max Spadef, right? Which it probably is in this matchup, if we're being honest, because what else do you switch in on? Let's do plus Spadef Nature. Shadow Ball doesn't do anything, so let's try Choice Specs. See, now we have a roll that makes sense. We have a low roll off a Specs Lele. So now that we know it's locked into Specs, Typical chooses to go to Kyurem, because it's not clicking Moonblast. We can also check here. Yeah, see, Shadow Ball does 36 to 40 off of Specs, off of a non-defensive Kyurem. Yeah, so, and that's exactly what we see. So we know it's Specs at Lele, and Typical is just going to rip a Specs Freeze Dry into this team. We also know this is Specs. If we pull up a Hoopa Unbound, that's an AV set, and it's doing 25 to 30, so you can already guess. 37 to 44, it did 52, so it is almost assuredly Specs. Let's do no HP. Yeah, maybe it's a little bulky, maybe it's Specs Modest, but yeah, it is assuredly Specs Kyurem as well. So Typical has two options here. He can swap out, predicting Scarf, or he can stay in and say, it's not Scarf. I know you're not Scarf. You're like something else, even though you know it's not AV, so I don't really know what else it would be. We see no AV, no leftovers, so maybe it's Twisted Spoon Expanding Force, but we do just see the Scarf, which is, yeah, pretty obvious in this matchup. And Typical chooses Slowking, which is just about the only thing that can take a hit here. And T-Waves. Now, Alaxel cannot take that T-Wave, because now Scarf Hoopa is, like, kind of neutered for the rest of the game. Yeah, you can still hit Slowking, you can still hit Wheezing, but you're not really hitting the Slowking for much anyways, so yeah, there's not a ton you can do other than kill Wheezing, which I guess is useful, but not, like, super useful. We see the full para off the first thing of Porygon. We see Second Noise to get a little bit of chip, and then we see Chilly Reception into Medicham as Alaxel teleports into Lele. Mostly thinking that, at least in my opinion, Typical switch last time, he's going to switch again. I can just rip either Shadow Ball into the Slowking again, because it's taking a lot of damage. I can rip Psy Shock, maybe, and deal a lot of damage with the Slowking. I could just rip Raw Moonblast. There's a lot of options to do here. However, Typical reveals that this has Poison Jab, which low-key, I didn't even know that I got, so, you know, maybe Alaxel might have forgotten about it too. But, yeah, Poison Jab Mega Medicham is going to clean up this Lele. This makes this a lot easier for Typical, because Psychic Terrain is not permanent anymore. It's going to go down after a while, which means that Hoopa is neutered a lot more. It's not going to click Terrain Boosted Expanding Force. It's just going to be base 80, so it's not going to be base 1 million stab instead. Well, it's not stab. It is stab. Sorry, I forgot this thing's typing. The other one is Dark Ghost. Or Psychic. I don't remember. I don't fight the Hoopas very often. I'm sorry. But this Medicham, once again, does not have any switch-ins. This is dead to CC at this point. I mean, it is faster. It is faster, so, you know, we'll think about that for a second, but obviously these two die to CC, and then do you really want to take a hit from Gouging Fire, like a full close combat on Gouging Fire, especially when you should know that the Ceruledge is Flash Fire Terra Fairy, so it's probably going to live, like, a hit or two. It's just not great. So, yeah, your two options here are Sneasler or Hoopa. I'm a little surprised to see Sneasler over Hoopa, because I feel like with so little turns of Psychic Terrain left, you'd want to go Hoopa and just click Expanding Force into the whole team, right? So it's Scarf Hoopa. Let's get Slowking. We know it's Max Spadef of the specs, right? That's what we're assuming. How much does expanding force in the terrain do? That's the real. I didn't put the terrain on. Okay, so it does nothing. So you have to make the knockoff call. So Alexa decides he doesn't want to make that call or lose pivot to Slowking and just decides to go Sneasler instead because of Acro and maybe catch this thing by surprise, thinking that he's going to trade HP and Metacham. And he does catch it by surprise, and he does get the acrobatics, which is really good. Now, the other thing to note, Typical just doesn't have great switch-ins to Sneasler. You don't really want to go raw wheezing and take 2 hits like that. That's a little difficult. That's a lot of damage. You don't really want to go Slowking when you're not physically bulky at all. Sarah Ledge is being safe for gouging fire, and Lando cannot take a hit right now. So it needs its HP. It needs all it can get HP-wise, especially when there's still a Scarfmon running around. So, yeah. Metacham getting sacked makes sense, and Alaxel takes advantage of it, gets the Metacham off, which is 1 less mon he has to worry about. Now, Alaxel's path to winning is either get through the Sarah Ledge with Gouging Fire, or kill this Lando and win with Scarf. Or just deal damage to this Lando so Sneasler can win in endgame, because at this point you really don't need your Unburden. Like, you're okay with switching out. Nothing is faster. Unless this reveals Scarf somehow, you're okay with just switching. But yeah, we see Earth Power come off, and 38. So we know from this damage, I'm not going to go into the calc and prove it, but we know from this damage that it is Life Orb Sheer Force, so we know it's not Scarf. This means Sneasler does still have an endgame despite having no Unburden, because it's still faster than everything. We see Slowking come in, Psychic Noise, Chilly Reception, etc., etc. Chilly's out, into Wheezing, and Porygon actually chooses to stay in this turn and gets, well, maybe it didn't choose to stay in, but it did stay in this turn. And we just see Slowking come right back out. Now, we do see an interesting interaction here where Download gets proc twice through the Neutralizing Gas. I didn't know that did I know that happened? I don't remember if I knew that was a thing, but that is interesting to note. Yeah, not much more to say about that, but that is quite weird. And we see Alexel is now just going to try and set up Sweep with Gouging Fire in front of this Slowking, knowing that Typical maybe wants to try and conserve this, but this is also kind of risky because what happens if Typical just stays in T-Waves, right? So we're going to see D-Nance come off, and Typical is going to choose to Chilly Recept instead of Click T-Wave, which is quite surprising to me at least. And we're just going to see Sarah Ledge come in. So you can see this is a really weird set from Typical. It's Flash Fire, Air Balloon, and Terra Fairy. This means it is triple immune to the moves that Gouging Fire normally runs, which are Heat Crash, Dragon Claw, and Earthquake. Now, the thing with Alaxel is he's actually running Crunch in order to hit the Slowking, which is why he was okay with setting in front of it, despite the fact that it was T-Wave. I think maybe the other thing Alaxel was thinking about was, at the end of the day, like, getting a ton of damage with this Gouging Fire is good, because if you get Chip on Lando, Sneasler can win with an SD. But this thing can also raw win without getting paralyzed. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that stand's kind of weird, because getting T-Wave loses you the game, I feel like, but it's fine. We're going to see the Sarah Ledge do some damage, but because of the drop, now it has to switch out. And Alaxel Heat Crashes the switch. Now, if you're Typical, you can take this 2 ways. One, he Heat Crashed the switch. He predicted my switch because of the defense drop. He's really fucking good at the game. 2, oh, he forgot about Flash Fire. Right? So we're going to see this take a ton of Helmet Chip. And now this is in range of a second CC. So if this isn't Morning Sun, this could die this turn. Right? And then we learn that he clicked Heat Crash because he did forget about Flash Fire. Now, we can look at this thing moves and assume a couple things. One, D-Dance Crunch Heat Crash. It could be running only Morning Sun last, or it could be running Dragon Coverage. I don't think it could be running anything else. Maybe it's Earthquake, but considering it didn't click into the Wheezing that wasn't floating in order to avoid helmet damage, it's not Earthquake. So, Crunch, Heat Crash, D-Dance, maybe it's Dragon, maybe it's Morning Sun. But I feel like if you're Alaxel, Morning Sun is just the best play here. Like, you know CC is only doing 30. Even if it crits, you live 1, and you can just Morning Sun the next turn. So if you are Morning Sun, I feel like you should have clicked it here in order to let this thing drop its defense and hit it afterwards. But instead, we see it die to CC. And now Typical is no longer in a, like, blatant losing position. Typical can still win this game. Now he's got Flash Fire activated, and we see Alexel admit that, yeah, he forgot. I mean, we could tell. You wouldn't have clicked this otherwise, but yeah. And now we see Scarf Hoopa come out. This is forcing this out, absolutely, all of the time. Or it's that, or Typical is sacking it, right? Now, at this point, there is a bit of a decision to make here. One, let's look at the Porygon HP. It's 99% in Parrot, so you really would like Porygon to take some damage because it might be running Ice Beam, it might be running Tri-Tuck. Either way, that's a lot of damage that Lando's taking that you'd like to preserve for Sneasler endgame. Two, you really might want the sack with the Ceruledge in order to just kind of outlast this team, or have more pivots in this team. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. My dog is going crazy upstairs. Let me get my train of thought back here. So, I feel like if you're Typical, your best play is to go Slowking. Even if it reads it with the Dark move, Typical is running Colbur Berry, as we'll see. So, that is, I think, the best option, because you can just go to this, live the Dark move because of Colbur, and then, I mean, you have to call if the Porygon is coming in or not. Because if you think the Porygon's coming in, I think you have to Chili into Ceruledge. If you don't think the Porygon's coming in, I mean, Chili is still fine. Because now you have CC into the whole team. It's not Metachamp CC, but it is still CC, so it is still quite strong. I think, especially if you're Colbur Berry, going Slowking is just the best play, and that's exactly what Typical does. As Alexel actually locks Expanding Force, wanting to make sure that Ceruledge dies, but Typical gets to preserve it instead, and now he's full HP Slowking as well. And we're going to see the Chili predict. And now he gets to go Lando on this Empoleon and rip an Earth Power into the whole team. Now, we did learn earlier that it is max speed F Porygon. It takes about 35 to 38 from an Earth Power. So you could go Porygon here and risk the full para. That is allowed. But if you're Alexel, you also have 4 Mons, so you're okay to sack one, which is what he does. He does sack the Empoleon. Now, this could be a game-losing play if this Porygon is played incorrectly, but it is... You're choosing to sack so that you maybe don't lose to Porygon getting full para, right? Let's say he goes Porygon instead. Typical switches out of fear of getting Ice Beamed into, what, Ceruledge? Because it eats one and can CC back. Alexa more than likely clicks Recover. I don't know. Maybe we see CC come out afterwards and then die to Porygon, and then we see Lando kill it. And then Hoopa is Scarf, so it forces it out again. Maybe it beats Slowking. That's a very weird endgame, but I think you still have a full health Empoleon too that can just come in on Slowking as a free sack as well, or come in on Ceruledge. I don't know what that endgame looks like. That's really hard to predict with that many turns. But yeah, I don't know. But we see Empoleon get sacked. No idea if that's a losing play or not. Honestly, we're not far ahead enough to really know for sure. But we get to Slowking. It gets Toxic. This is really too late for Toxic to really have any effect. So if you're Typical, you probably just don't care that much. And we see Hoopa come in, really just to hit this thing as hard as it can so that Sneasler can win, right? That's obviously the plan here. And it shows it's Colbur Berry. It lives and it gets a T-Wave off. Now, this thing, its Scarf, doesn't matter. Now it loses to Lando. That is huge for Typical. Now it loses to Lando, and you maybe live the hit from Sneasler, right? So all you need is Chip on Porygon at this point, which you can get from Ceruledge, and you still have Regenerator on this. This can be winning for Typical. Now, let's do some math here. Landorus probably needs all its health, right? Typical in the battle had 48 HP EVs. We learned this after. We don't know this in game. We also learn, let's get a Sneasler. It's not Monotype Choice Band, but that's the first set that comes up. That's full. So let's go no item. It's not Poison Touch, so let's go Unburden, because it'll bug out if I don't select an actual thing. Because it's Unburdened Sneasler, you can make the assumption that it's Adamant as well. So you have no item. Its best hit is Acrobatics. Sneasler is 43 to 51 off Acrobatics, right? So you don't... Worst case, you really don't want to be taking 2, but you can a lot of the time. Now, let's say Sneasler gets a Swords Dance off, like in front of Ceruledge or something. Because it could get one in front of Ceruledge. It could also get one in front of Slowking if T-Wave misses. That's actually a lie. It would just click Psy Noise and kill it. So it could get an SD off in front of Ceruledge. So if Alexel gets that positioning correct, there's an 18.8% chance that he just wins because it is able to kill Lando. And also, you may not know this as if you're from Typical's perspective. Actually, why would you run Night Slash? You have Throat Chop. But if this is running Throat Chop versus a Slowking, you're not Fizz Def. You always die as well to +2. So if it gets an SD in front of Saralech, there is a chance that Alaxel wins. At this point, that is what Alaxel was playing for. It's either do that or just get a bit of damage on Landorus, right? Yeah. So we see Typical go Saralech, and this gets full parried. It was locked in a knockoff anyways, and this already lost this item, so that really didn't matter all that much. We see Bitterblade get a crit, which is a little nasty, but if we do some math here versus a Porygon 2 as a special wall, a Porygon 2 with close combat, 49 to 58. So that Bitterblade crit did end up mattering a little bit. Yeah. Bitterblade does 29 to 33 otherwise. Oh, wait, it's way more defensive than I thought. Oh, unless this is like bulky Saralech. It's bulky Saralech. So yeah, that crit did end up mattering. But to be fair, he also would still heal quite a bit. And he could maybe, if he has SD, he could clear hit. CC's still doing a whole lot. It could get full parry at any time. It's not the biggest swing of RNG, but it is something to note there. But this is a -1 Saralech on the field. It can't Poltergeist the Sneasler. You know it's going to die. Alaxel has the positioning now. Now he gets the SD versus the whole team, and Slowking's at 1. Even if you're not Throat Chop, you're probably killing with you're probably just killing with Acro. Alaxel shows Night Slash, meeting no Throat Chop, which is interesting because Throat Chop is just better. Sure, you get the crit chance with Night Slash, but Throat Chop just kills a lot of the time, so I don't really know. It's fine, though. It doesn't end up mattering for this. And now we get this 18.8% chance to win at all. Alaxel does not get it. He actually gets a min roll, which is kind of funny. Typical says GG early because he knows in that moment that either he dies to Acro and loses, or he lives Acro and wins. And that's it. That's the game. Now, let this be a lesson. If Alaxel at any point whoa, that was a mouthful. If Alaxel at any point forced Stealth Rocks with Empoleon earlier, he would have won in this endgame, if he kept them up. Weezing was defog, but if he forced Rocks with Empoleon and kept them up, he would have won this endgame because of that 12% on the Lando. So let this be a lesson to how important Stealth Rocks could be, but I mean, that was just a really well-played game from both. I think Alaxel made a few too many safe plays. I think one prediction could have swayed it, while Typical had to make quite a few predictions in order to get there. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a really difficult matchup for Typical, I feel like, so I do think that is a really cool win for him. But that's all I have for week 2. Hopefully next week we'll have a little bit more content to go over, which is funny to say because this video ended up going an hour and 7 minutes anyways, so fuck me, I guess. But yeah, I'll see you guys for week 3. Hopefully I have some good matches then. Thank you for watching. Peace.